hunch is that, so we're going to welcome everybody via this recording of the session, and there are many who have registered to be part of this who are not present at the moment. So we want to provide this to them and anyone else who is able to join or is interested in this topic, in this discussion. So as I said previously, my name is David Bright. I'm the operating officer for the division. And we will be focusing today on how to do submissions to the Academy of Management. And so I'm going to try and play some slides here. Let me see if I can get these to come up correctly. Hope they do. All right. Just a moment. This will work now. There we go. All right. I think that works now. Okay, so here's our it's our second annual submissions workshop. These are the countries and locations of those who've signed up for this workshop. See, there's interest from all over the world. And just as an introduction to who we are as a division, we are the Organization Development and Change Division of the Academy of Management. We are especially interested in research and practices that help to build healthy, humane organizations, communities, striving to build high impact scholarship. We support theory, applied research, and especially interested in how to create meaningful change that helps to develop people, organizations, and society. So this is from our webpage for the division, and I encourage you to check us out there. This year, our 2025 program chairs are Jody Hoffer-Gattel and James Vardaman and Richard Hall, who Richard is based in Australia, and it's about 3 a.m. in the morning there at this hour. So he is not joining us live. I have a video that he has provided for us as part of our presentation today. And so we'll hear from each of our chairs. Now, just as a point of information, the way that the Academy of Management is organized is that we have each division has elected officers who oversee the development of the program each year. So the program chair, which is Jody at the moment, is responsible for the overall program for our division. And so she's responsible for overseeing the submissions process and the reviewing process, and then ultimately the selection, the submissions or proposals that are accepted and are included in the program. James, as the program chair-elect, assists her in that process. And then Richard Hall is specifically overseeing proposals for professional development workshops. And so he is filling that function this year, and all of the proposals for professional development workshops will go to him, and he will oversee the process of deciding which of those are selected and included in our program. So I wanted to do just a very quick poll. If we could get this to work, just to see kind of what your experience is. So hopefully you're seeing this.
Yes.
And I invite you to just answer those questions really quickly, and we'll see kind of a little bit more about what brings you here. And so, how long have you been a part of the ODC division? And what are you planning to do, or what is your experience as a submitter?
David, do you want us to participate in this?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Okay. I just did so.
We don't have too many of us here, so
we might skew the results toward the
definitely
toward the right
on the number of years. I'm like, oh my God, that many years.
That's a good point. All right, so we're going to go ahead and end that, and Let me share the results. Are you able to see that? Okay, so we have someone who's not a member yet. We encourage you to join. Just joined. We have one, and then three of us, 3 to 5 years, and then more than 10 years. I think there's 3 of us would probably make that profile. So as far as submission as a submitter, looks like 4 of us submitted before, and we
Could you
plan
scroll there? Sorry, I just saw it.
there now. So it looks like we have a PDW proposal, several PDW proposals to be submitted, and papers to be submitted, and none for symposia. So we might want to talk just a little about symposia,
Mhm.
what those are, because I think that's especially for newer members of the academy, it's something that's kind of unique to our process. So without delaying this any further, let's hear first.
Hi everyone,
Whoops.
my name is.
Let's hear first
Can
from
I talk for about the call for proposals or not? Okay,
Yeah.
it's either way.
So why don't we do this? Let's start with
Okay.
Jody. I'll stop sharing here.
Yeah, it's
And-
kind of overarching, but then
Yeah.
I'll defer right over. I just put together a couple, it's basically what we have put in our call for proposals and just share it briefly, but welcome, and we are eager to receive your proposals and provide any feedback that might be useful today. So you probably are very well aware of the dates for the meetings and the deadlines for submissions, but really what's unique to organization development and change is our focus on change and changing. And David shared with you just now our values as a division. And to me, that speaks to the critical importance, not just of change and changing, but how change happens as a process. And in particular, one could argue that change that's carried out through inclusive relational processes with input from multiple stakeholders at multiple levels of action can be critical for building thriving organizations and communities. So we have a certain kind of value that we place as a division on inclusivity and hearing from multiple perspectives. And at this year's meeting, there is no kind of theme for the overall academy meeting, but my experience in Scandinavia, and I think this is not a unique perspective to me, is that multi-stakeholder relationships are used strategically in that part of the world to achieve sustainable outcomes, and that it's a pretty intentional process, whether it's labor management or multi-sector collaboration. They just really put a high priority on that to sustain outcomes. And so our focus this year on how change happens is particularly relevant. But then moving beyond that kind of broad statement, some of the questions that we invite you to consider are, again, at this kind of with a appreciation of multi-level change processes. What are the strategies and processes that enable effective change at the individual, group, organization, community, and institutional levels of action? Successful submissions could address any of those levels or span across more than one. Also, what are the strategies and processes that enable multiple diverse stakeholders to work together to achieve sustainable outcomes? Sometimes stakeholders come from very different perspectives and interests, et cetera. So there's a kind of the potential for constructive conflict in these change processes. Thirdly, how can leaders, managers, workers, clients, and community members engage effectively in coordinated collective action using differences as actually a valued resource? This idea that differences are a source of strength because they bring unique ideas to the table. And if we recognize them, they can actually help us find more integrative solutions that are more likely to be implemented and succeed. And then both within and cross-organization relationships, we go really beyond a single organization as we need to in today's more complex environment, whether they're supply networks or ecosystems, how to build those larger systems of relationships to achieve sustainable change. And then how can leaders and managers respond to these contemporary challenges and trends by using new and different approaches to change? How can innovative cross-cutting structures be designed to support multi-stakeholder relationships? So there's a relational component of organizational change from the ODC perspective, but we also recognize the role of structures, whether it's inclusive meetings or shared accountability or shared rewards or conflict resolution processes that may help to create a more sustainable outcome. And then more broadly, how do these different parties react to the pressures that are brought to bear by these larger societal and organizational and environmental changes that we're facing? So it's a lot, and I hope some of these resonate with you. And we have a final kind of statement as a division about what successful proposals look like. In particular, we hope they provoke new ideas, new learning, integrating, and here's something we really do value also as a division, and that is bringing scholarship together with application. We have this, we center the idea of rigor and relevance, and I know a lot of divisions strive for that, but we really do put it front and center. So we invite you to really think about the rigor of the scholarship you're submitting, but also, just as importantly, its relevance.
Thank you, Jody. Appreciate that overview, the call for submissions. So let's go ahead and hear from James next, and then I'll play the video from Richard, will be talking about the PDWs. So James, go ahead.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So I want to say two things. So I think I've got 7 minutes allotted. I'd like to first talk about symposia, because you said you wanted, David, you kind of noted that a lot of people don't know. Symposia are like a set of papers on a topic, a set of paper proposals basically on a topic. And so the reason they're so great is because it allows you to develop a main theme with multiple authors. And so, for example, imagine that you are interested in, for example, if org change has some linkage to people quitting. So you can get a team of authors together to develop papers separately, and you combine those into a theme of looking at the effect of org change on turnover, and you can have 3 or 4 papers that address that, and that can really build knowledge from multiple perspectives on that main thematic topic. And so that's where symposia provide an opportunity to do that. I've been a part of many of them. We wound up, David and I wound up writing a book out of a symposium we did at Academy one time on international retention. And so they can be really powerful and an excellent way to sort of develop a thematic topic for scholarship. The topic I'm talking about today is actually on preparing manuscripts for submission. What makes a good submission to the ODC division? And so Jody sort of laid out a nice overview with that. I'm going to share my screen, David, real quick. So is it visible to you guys? Okay. So I only have a few minutes. I do this for 2 hours, actually, for our doctoral candidates when they start, but I've condensed it down to 7 minutes. So we're going to talk about some what some elements of a good submission are. And so if your paper doesn't, meet the bar for all of these, that doesn't mean it won't be accepted, but this is just sort of in an ideal world what a great submission would look like. And so So what's required to publish in the ODC division? First, it would be a clear theoretical contribution. And so the way you do that, there's various approaches you can take. One is spotting a gap, finding some hole in the literature. You can also resolve tension in the literature or bring a new perspective into the phenomenon. And so there's various ways you can do that. But the big key is you need to be doing something novel with your research in general, unless it's a review paper or a meta-analysis or something like that. In general, if you've got an original empirical submission, it needs to provide some new knowledge, some novelty, something that we don't know. Your paper should also have a theoretical element. It should be underpinned by a theoretical perspective. That theory should generally, not always, but generally be applicable to all of your hypotheses. So if you've got a set of hypotheses, they should be underpinned by a theoretical perspective. That'll really help sort of unify the ideas to the reader and give you a better chance with the reviewers to have your submission accepted. Again, if you don't meet the bar on all of these, it may not be the end of the world, but in general, a really good submission. The hypotheses, you have an argument for every hypothesis. So you don't have, down at the bottom, I have the double barrel. What that means is you don't just lay out a set of arguments and then put all your hypotheses down together. Hypothesis 1, 2, and 3 together, just in one section. Try to have clear arguments for each hypothesis that you have in your papers. That'll really help the reader focus on what you're trying to say and help them understand, you know, what you're testing or looking at. Data and methods. You know, we have methodological and analytical heterogeneity in the division. Really, the big key here is make sure your analysis matches the data that you have and the question that you're trying to answer. They go with the design of your study. And so don't try to, because you've heard that linear regression is the sexy method that's in the field, don't try to force that on your data. If a simple ANOVA or t-test is going to work, or is most appropriate for the design that you have, just use that. You don't, we have heterogeneity, heterodoxy in this division. No one's looking for you to fit sort of that round peg in a square hole. So just use the analytical approach that's appropriate for your data, and that'll give you the best purchase for your submission. So I know a lot of people in our division are qualitative scholars. I've done qualitative work. I trained under a guy named John Amos, who's a very strong qualitative scholar. The key here is just that if you do qualitative work, it requires rigor. So a lot of times people come in with a post-positivist perspective and they try to do qualitative research and they don't really understand that it goes beyond just interviewing people and writing up what you found. There is some rigor to it. And so there's a nice book chapter by Anne Langley and I believe it's her student Abdallah is the last name. But they talk about two primary approaches, a Joya approach, which is a single case study, and an Eisenhardt approach, which is sort of comparative case studies. But there are steps to follow and rigor that goes into that kind of research. So if you're doing qualitative work and you're submitting qualitative work, just remember that there's a rigorous process you should follow and do your research and understand, you know, sort of the guideposts that you need to follow to do rigorous qualitative work. Also, it's always useful. You know, a lot of times, you know, the majority of scholars in the academy are post-positivists who do quantitative work. And so it's sometimes good to offer a rationale for why you're doing qualitative work. So like if you're studying a process or it's very exploratory, you know, providing that rationale will help that scholar who may not see a lot of qualitative work understand why you're doing this type of work. So your discussion section, tie back your contribution, that gap or that tension that you're resolving, tie it back in your discussion section. Make sure you have practical implications. We have a lot of people who are in practice in our division. So you need to tell the reader why what you're doing matters. And so this gets back to what Jody was saying about relevance. What is the relevance to society or to organizations or to managers of your work? And so make sure you tell us that. I mean, I know a lot of other divisions, practical implications can be sort of a couple of sentences and you're done. Our division really values that practical element. And so you need to do a little more. You need to tell us why this matters and how it can be used. So what else needs to be written well? You can lose the reviewer in the first few pages. And one of my mentors always told me, don't put the reviewer in a bad mood in the first few pages of your paper. Make sure that the reviewer knows what you're doing and you have clarity in your writing, especially early on. If you follow those steps, you'll have a good chance of succeeding with your submission with our division. And thank you. I'll stop sharing, David, as soon as I can get back to
Very good. Okay, thank you very much. Before we go on and hear from Richard, what questions might you have or what insights have you gained? Could we take just a moment? I'm going to give us 30 seconds. Invite everyone, no matter what your experience or role on this call, but is there some insight or question that has emerged for you? I'll give you about 30 seconds to write a quick response, and then we'll kind of see where we are at this point. What insight?
Where should we write that?
In the chat. Sorry, I should be more specific. Yeah, in the chat. Yeah, what question or insight has emerged for you to this point in our discussion? What question or insight has emerged for you to this point in our discussion? Couple here. We'll give it another few seconds. All right, I'm seeing two there. I'm going to invite you to, as we continue with our discussion today, please write an insight, any insight that comes to you or any question that occurs to you. We certainly want to invite those perspectives. All right, very good. Okay, so we have from Laura, the importance of the division theme for the submission. Okay, good. And Fleur, the insight is that there's such a thing as a symposia. I think that's am I summarizing that accurately? Okay, good. Okay, we can come back to that. And then Melina, process perspective is a possible way to go. Yeah, we do, I think, appreciate process-oriented research in our work as well in this division. All right, let's hear from Richard. Let's see if I can queue up his presentation here. And Richard's going to talk about professional development workshops. So let me
Get ready for a really cool accent.
Yeah.
I think.
And I share that perspective. Okay, here we go. Here's Richard. Oh, I gotta make sure my settings are correct. Hold on. Make sure that it's set up for video. Okay, I think we're good. Oops. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm going to press play. If you can hear, please give me a thumbs up.
Oops.
Hi, everyone. My name is Richard Hall, and I'm the program chair for the PDW stream for the ODC Division for 2025. So fabulous that you can listen in. I just want to say a few things about the PDW program for ODC for Copenhagen. And my main message is to encourage you to make a submission for the PDW stream because we're really excited to get a broad range of really exciting professional development workshops for Copenhagen 2025. Just a few reminders, all the information I'm really talking about is actually accessible in various ways on the AOM website. Also the ODC website, don't forget to have a look at that as well. But PDWs in a nutshell, professional development workshops, of course, variety of formats. Their flexibility is one of the great appeals of them. So typically at least 1 hour in duration they need to be. 90 minutes, 2 hours, above 2 hours is pretty unusual, but that sort of format. Submissions are reviewed by me, the chair, so that's a fairly straightforward process. And with PDWs, remember, just one sponsoring division or interest group. So please think about ODC for that. In terms of what we're looking for, I mean, the heart of a professional development workshop is really the idea of taking expertise or experience and demonstrating the takeaways that attendees at the workshop are going to get. It's a real genuine workshop opportunity. So a variety of formats to be encouraged. Think really creatively. The most important thing is that they're interactive and experiential, right? A professional development workshop, we want people to be doing things and learning new skills and mindsets. So they could be breakout groups, workshops, sort of formats of any kind, roundtables, even tours, research incubators, working and doing different things is great. As I say, that emphasis on interactivity is really important for PDWs for the Academy and for ODC in particular. Some of the things that really, I think, add to the attractiveness of a good PDW: audience appeal. Is it going to appeal to a big audience? And we're very interested in stretching the appeal beyond just the conventional organization development and change audience. Secondly, innovation. Is it doing something a bit different, a bit new, a bit innovative? Thirdly, of course, potential for professional development. Like, what am I going to learn? What skills and what new things, what new groovy things am I going to get out of attending the workshop? And impact, I guess, would be the fourth thing. So as I say, we're really interested in ones that are broad in terms of their scope and understanding of change and development, but that are highly interactive and really have a payoff in terms of the takeaways that you're going to get if you attend your professional development workshop. There's a handy paper actually on the AOM website under the PDW submission guidelines. It's done a few years ago by William Dugan on guidelines for PDWs. Makes a few really good points about the characteristics of good PDWs worth dwelling on just for a moment. The first point he makes is about being innovative. So yeah, go experiential, go for something that is highlighting a new approach, insight, technology, model, way of teaching or thinking about a particular topic related to change. That sort of stuff is great. Novel applications of something, for example, new technologies at the moment, you know, if you're working anywhere in the space or had any experience with AI, an application, for example, of artificial intelligence to any aspect of research or practice or teaching, fantastic. That would be great. Secondly, he talks about being inclusive. So think about you're going to get a range of attendees from doctoral students right up to very experienced, seasoned professors and so forth. So thinking about the fact that you want to make it accessible and something for people to do regardless of the level of experience. Thirdly, integrative, great to bring together different communities that might be interested in the workshop. That's fantastic. Fourthly, developmental. Yeah. So what new skills or approaches or mindsets or hacks or tips or techniques am I going to learn as a result? And provocative, yeah, great. We're totally in the business of doing some new things which really push the boundaries. Totally up for that. I'm very keen on getting those submissions. And Dugan talks about it being andragogical, which really is just adult learning theory and adult learning. And the bottom line there is experiential, right? So what are we actually doing in this session? My last point is to think about the fact that when it comes to a PDW, they are different from symposia. So often we see PDWs that are kind of borderline. Is that really a symposium or a PDW? I just want to say that a symposium characteristically is a panel or a group of often academics or practitioners, but as a panel or a series of presentations on one particular theme designed to generate new insights into that. So if this is all about a panel of smart people and a group of people listening, then that's more of a symposium. The PDW is really about doing new things in the session, right? And that could be learning something new or how to use something differently. Obviously, it can be about a theme or a topic, that's great. But the emphasis there on learning and doing new things and new ways of workshopping, whether that be in research or practice or teaching. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, well, great. That's enough from me. Really look forward to your submissions. Put the word out there. Encourage others that you know of to think about submitting for a professional development workshop. They're often amongst the most fun and I think practical and useful sessions at Academy. I'm really looking forward to pulling together a great program for Copenhagen 2025. I hope you can be a part of it and I hope to see you there. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Right. Very helpful. I'm very grateful to Richard for the effort to put that together for us, though he cannot be here in person. All right, so just looking at the insights and questions that have come up, I think this has been very interesting. So Laura talks about the importance of the division theme for the application. We talked about that previously. Fleur, insight on symposia. Could you maybe elaborate a little on that and kind of what your insight is there?
Yes. Well, 1 second. It's really weird if you have the noise canceling on, so I had to kill that. I hadn't thought about doing a symposia because in my mind, what I created was the thought that it is a massive thing to organize.
Mm.
At the stage that I am in, then I also thought, is it as a PhD candidate, do you start with the symposia? I don't know. It was just not an element that crossed my mind to also be active in. So that was an insight because I thought it was an invitation from your side. Oh, well, think about a symposia. It's if you have a shared theme and a set of papers. And then I think, well, that is very interesting. So that's why that was a new insight for me.
Yeah.
And
I'd love
also,
to see
sorry,
that.
just one little addition. Sorry, one little
Okay.
addition, because I was thinking about what Richard just mentioned, because I plan to do submit a PDW, and then that he was emphasizing on the difference between the symposia and a PDW. So that was also an insight from his talk just now. Sorry, Jody.
No, I'll speak to each of those briefly because we have a sequence of our leadership within the ODC as other divisions do. So a few years ago, I was in charge of workshops and went to a bunch of them. And I found that one of the key distinguishing features of a good workshop was that it felt different from a symposium. There was one I attended that I thought I accidentally was in a symposium because it was the experts talking. And so even if you start with a set of experts giving some perspectives, you move quickly into action. But I would say, just with respect to, is it appropriate for a PhD student to be involved in being in or even organizing a symposium? One thing I've seen is that it gives junior faculty and PhD students a chance to build their networks, especially if they have a colleague or sponsor who's more senior and who might give them the role of reaching out to people, or you're really in the process of putting it together, doing it, and then following up. You're starting to build out your network, and you start to be especially if you're the one making the introductions, it can give you visibility in your field. And it looks like James wants to pick up on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing I talked about the collection of papers. It can also be like a panel, like he was describing in the video. So when I was a doctoral student, I was on a couple of these, and it was a really good way. It was like your paper for the symposium is like just an abstract basis. It's 5 or 6 pages, part of it. So you don't have to build out an entire paper. And also the students at my prior institution, the doc students would create these, and they didn't always get them accepted, but they would try to create these panel symposiums to where they would talk, like it would consist of the 5 panel members and sort of what they would talk about. And so that's a good way, Jody, that was really great insight for you to invite people who you would like to get to know or be involved with. Say, hey, would you like to join this panel that I'm putting together as a doc student? And that kind of gets you on their radar and allows you to do some networking. So it's a very useful thing. Can I add one more thing, David? I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I know we have a small group, so I don't know what the breakout is going to look like. So I'm just going to go ahead. I was going to say this in the breakout about the PDWs, but one mistake when I was PDW chair last year that I noticed, some PDWs that could potentially have been interesting, but just couldn't make it through, was because they were too context specific and they wouldn't have a broad enough appeal. And so a couple that we had last year, one of them was just for law enforcement officers. And it was like, okay, this is actionable stuff, but we don't have enough law enforcement officers for me to justify having this PDW in the program. And so the action is a big part of it, but it also has to be action or learning new things for the division, for a large enough swath of the division to be useful.
Sorry, can I just ask a question on the panel? Because it was so insightful. I attended Chicago, and there was, I think it was a session, which is a mixture of a symposium, as you explained, and a workshop, because the panel was there, was a common theme, and it was very interactive, and maybe because the topic was paradox, so it was everything. So that's why it was a new insight for me in this session, that there is a distinction between the two. And my question is, because in the guidelines, there's because I'm now reaching out to sponsors for the PDW, which is super great because there's nice interaction already prior to the conference. Maybe I've missed it in the guidelines. Is there a total number of sponsors that you need, or a minimum or maximum?
James, do you want to answer that, or?
When you say sponsors, do you mean like divisions?
I thought that I saw in the guidelines that you need sponsors if you are going to submit your PDW. And now I'm reaching out, and some of them said yes, which is super nice, and others
got
are
it.
already overbooked for their.
I did not consider number of sponsors when I was the PDW chair. Jody, did you consider
No?
number of sponsors?
No, but I think there's moving, I think the target has shifted. It used to be, you could have, I think you can always put in as many as you want, but it maybe now that the first one is the only one who gets to decide. If it goes forward. It used to be, if I understand, because I've done a lot of PDW submissions, I would put in 3 and maybe 2 of them would choose it, but I didn't have to specify which was kind of make or break. And that just puts a higher, a little bit more stress in choosing which one is the primary, especially if you're trying to come up with something that's appealing to multiple divisions. Often ODC is a co-sponsor of things because change is part of everything. So it just is mistakes for choosing which is your primary and then which others one will sponsor it, but not approve it.
Yeah, so the primary one is the only one that decides, and then it's actually after the primary one has accepted it is when the others get the choice to say, well, okay, we will also sponsor this. So your primary one is the really important one.
That's right.
But it might look attractive. I mean, to someone like yours, Richard, whoever's making that kind of call on the PDWs to see, we've got 5 other divisions here. And if I do accept it, they will all have the option of co-sponsoring, which could be great for building cross-divisional relationships. So that might be one reason that people put multiples on there, but you don't need their permission their approval ahead of time. They're just there as people who will co-sponsor if they find it interesting to their members.
Yeah, I can appreciate that that's confusing. Just as a process note, because our group is so small, I think we'll just be most beneficial just to keep it here. I was planning to do some breakout groups where we could kind of choose between a deeper dive into PDWs versus papers or symposia, but I think just with the group we have and the questions that we have, that it'd be beneficial just to keep it here. So with your permission, unless you have really strong feelings that really would like to do a deeper dive, let's just keep it here. I'd like to add my perspective on that question as well. So just to reiterate the point, sponsors, when we're talking about sponsors, we are essentially requesting sponsorship from the division that could list it in their program. And so, yeah, you have a primary division that you're submitting to that makes the decision as to whether or not it's going to be accepted. And then other division chairs have the opportunity to look at the proposal and decide whether they will list themselves as a sponsor as well. So for the PDWs, you're essentially making it available to other divisions to provide their endorsement. I also wanted to add my voice on the symposia. I think that symposia are one of the best kept secrets in the division. And to be perfectly frank, they are, there's so many advantages to doing symposia, and especially as an organizer and especially as a doctoral student. I did not understand. I had a really great mentor when I was a doctoral program, Kim Cameron, who helped me. And I know he was a mentor to Jody as well. And he helped me. He essentially said, "You're just do this." And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But was very encouraging and helping me to figure out how to frame it. And then I learned how to reach out to other scholars or other people who might have an interest in the topic. And it was fantastic. And What I found and I've seen over the years is that symposia tend to bring together a really thoughtfully collated, curated set of presentations and people who work well together. They tend to be accepted at a much higher rate than papers, which is a really important thing to know. And as James said, you don't have to have a complete paper to submit as part of the symposium. They're easier to write. So higher acceptance, opportunity to be to network, and you don't have to write as much. So it can be even an idea in process. So there's some significant advantages to symposium. Laura, do you want to add to that?
Just super briefly, my first AOM as a PhD student, I also participated through a symposium and being the organizer. And what we did was basically I was the main organizer, but it was co-organized by me and my first supervisor. And so that way I had some guidance as David just mapped out. And I really felt this was so helpful. Like I can also really appreciate this thing of feeling lost, like because I didn't attend an AOM conference before, but at the same time, this was so helpful and I could get a better idea. And then actually also at other events in the week before my symposium, people, when you network, would ask like, oh, why are you here? And I would talk about the symposium. And it was actually so nice because people would then come to the symposium that I just met a day or the day before. And it really helped to kind of start foster like a community and feel, especially because it's always so much easier. I personally feel like to engage with other maybe PhD students, but you also really want to increase your network on other levels as well. And through this, I felt it was then much easier to speak to other professors because I was in touch via email before to the ones that would participate in the workshop. And then it's easier kind of to keep going with the conversation.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. All right. I want to come back to Melina's insight. The process perspective is a possible way to go. Melina, would you mind sharing just a little about
Sure.
the insight, why it was important for you?
Sure. Well, actually, I'm currently finishing up writing the paper that I'm planning to submit, maybe. And I'm still looking at the data and trying to figure out, okay, how do I theorize that in the end? So I was thinking, okay, maybe I go more into a process perspective on this because there is a process in the data, but I just don't have that in the model yet. So maybe that's just one way of developing the paper further. So that was why I wrote that down.
Thank you. Any thoughts from our program chairs about the different types of papers and how they can be positioned to be successful? Jody, any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess I would say because our vision theme this time is how change happens, we're clearly open to process and how that plays. So if you have process data, I would consider that a gem and really play it up. I love the idea of reflecting on how that process currently may not show up in your model, but it could. So yeah, I would encourage you to think that through and submit it to ODC. Sounds very much sounds like something our members would love to hear about and to provide feedback on.
Thank you, Jody. I was thinking also, James, one of the things that you highlighted is the importance of having a really sound empirical format for an empirically oriented paper, which I think is important. So, like one of the best bits of feedback I ever received when I was a doctoral student is that you need to understand the logical template that aligns with your objectives. And so there are different types of templates for different types of papers. And I think, James, you were speaking especially to more empirically oriented papers. And the basic subsets there are your qualitative papers versus quantitative or positivist papers. But there are also conceptual papers. that could be literature review or theory development in nature. James or Jody, do you have any perspectives on what would constitute a really high quality paper for those different types of submissions?
I mean, I was just gonna follow up on what Jody said. I think the big key is just to make sure the majority of our work, I mean, we're studying change. It's by nature process oriented in many cases. I mean, so the big key is to make sure that your analysis fits with your design and you can draw inferences from your results that are defensible given your design. I mean, and that's the place where a lot of people come up short, because we do have people from practice and people from different sort of ontological, epistemological perspectives coming together in this division. And I think sometimes we get mismatches of sort of like, you know, you've got a cross-sectional design, but you're trying to draw inferences about process. That's difficult to do sometimes. And so we'll see those types of mistakes. I mean, to me, to answer your question, David, the biggest thing is just novelty. You need to have something to say or some finding that is interesting, that is new, not just interesting, something that's like, oh, that's interesting. You're showing me something that I didn't know or that I, is counterintuitive. I think that's the big key. I mean, I think that having that overcomes a lot of times other, flaws or whatever in the paper. So, I mean, so one of my favorite journals for you guys is Human Relations, and it does not have the methodological rigor of a JAP, Journal of Applied Psychology or Personnel Psychology or whatever, but they have really interesting papers that have societal relevance a lot of times. And so that's a very powerful thing. So if whatever you have that's novel, that's new, that's interesting, that's what's most important for your paper. And I think that's the key to a successful submission across any of those templates you're talking about, David, like a quant paper, a qual paper, a conceptual paper, or a lit review, something new, something interesting.
I guess I would say that in terms of methodologies, one method that I like for process studies is actually mixed methods. When you have some quantitative data, either psychometric or outcomes of interest, pre and post, and then enough qualitative data to tell a story about what happened in between. And that may not all be in the same paper. It may be part of more of a research stream, but that combination is really nice, and it speaks to different people who have different criteria for being persuaded that this is a valuable approach to take. Some people you want to see the numbers, some people want to hear the stories. Often the two are very complementary. So I teach methods, and I love to think of it as not an either or. They don't always fit in the same paper because each one takes some space, but they can contribute to your research program. Each paper can reference findings from the other if you do mixed methods across papers. As far as this question about what makes a paper interesting, I totally agree that that's such an important criteria. And I was thinking to myself, what do I find makes a paper interesting? And it's actually a combination of it addresses a current kind of pressing issue for organizations, and at the same time taps into or references back to some very deep ongoing philosophical issues that we face as human beings. That kind of combination of the timeless and the very timely, I think, is really one way to think about an interesting paper.
I'd like to build on one thing you just said too, Jody, which is you might have a study that has multi-methods, but you need space to develop.
Yeah.
One of the common pitfalls I see, particularly among newer scholars, is trying to put everything in, trying to do too much with the single paper. And so you don't have to demonstrate mastery of every little component of a method that you have learned, or all of the way of framing of a construct. You don't have to account for every single possible definition or nuance. You don't have to account for every possible explanation for the phenomena that you're just studying. it's important just to focus the paper in a way that allows you to identify a clearly discernible question that you're trying to resolve, and then create a logical sequence throughout the rest of the paper that helps you to build an answer that's defensible by the time you're done. And usually that means there's a lot of things that might be interesting, but not relevant to answering that question. So streamlining it down to the essence is a really critical skill that helps you to be able to communicate effectively. All right, I think we have time for one other question. If there are any questions that you would like to raise, please raise your hand and let's hear. All right, hearing none, let me ask you for just your one thing you're grateful for as we finish our discussion today. That could be an insight, it could be just something that you appreciate from our discussion today. And could you please take 30 seconds, just type that into the chat really quickly. All right. Floor connecting. Grateful we are a small group. Yeah, that does have its advantages, doesn't it? Building community. Found the distinction between PDW and symposia really helpful. The new original research, good. And meeting new people. Well, thank you so much for participating today. It's been a wonderful session. And I encourage you, we all encourage you to keep coming to these events and opportunities, build community. And I'm confident in saying that we are all more than happy to help anyone, either here in our live event, or if you're watching this video post event, we'd be happy to help with any questions we can. And so with that, we will conclude our workshop for today. Thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful day or evening or wherever you may be in the world. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
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 David, you can stop the recording.